In your politics this Thursday, the House of Representatives is scheduled to vote this morning for the Respect for Marriage Act. The bipartisan legislation would provide protections for same-sex and interracial marriages. Our Washington correspondent Cassie Simeon joins us now from Capitol Hill this morning. Some are hailing this bill as historic, Cassie, but others say it doesn't go far enough. Break down the legislation for us.
Giselle, this bill essentially says that if the Supreme Court were to overturn gay marriage in the future, that states would have to recognize marriages that were performed legally. But what it doesn't do is provide a federal law that would protect same-sex marriages and make them legal.
I'm particularly happy because it'll be one of the last bills that I will sign as Speaker in an enrollment ceremony, and it has strong bipartisan support in the House and in the Senate. I think it's a great step forward for us.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi touting to reporters that the House would soon pass the Respect for Marriage Act, sending it to the president most likely this week. But Paul Schiff-Berman, a law professor at the George Washington University, says the bill would only offer partial protections for same-sex marriages if the Supreme Court one day reverses its decision known as Obergefell, which recognized a constitutional right to same-sex marriage.
This law does not itself create a federal right to marry if you're two gay people. It does not provide the same statutory protection that Obergefell provides as a matter of constitutional law. What it does do, though, is it allows states to choose to recognize gay marriages.
If passed, the Respect for Marriage Act would require states to recognize same-sex marriages legally performed in other states. It also ensures the same-sex spouses are entitled to certain benefits. Democrats say that's reason enough to support it.
This is essentially saying we are agreeing with what the current marriage laws are in this country for interracial and for same-sex couples. And I think this measure is very reasonable, and everyone should support it if you support the current laws of the country.
But Schiff-Berman says it raises the question of whether this goes beyond the Constitution's full faith and credit clause, which requires states to respect judicial proceedings across state lines. He says if Obergefell were ever overturned and the rights of gay marriage returned to the states, states may be able to challenge the mandates of the Respect for Marriage Act in court.
The question is whether that goes farther than the Constitution requires. Then presumably one state might say that this statute is forcing them to recognize a marriage they don't think is appropriate, and therefore it's an infringement on their state's sovereignty.
Schiff-Berman says it's unclear if the Supreme Court would take the dramatic step of reversing the decision, but he notes the court did overturn the constitutional right to abortion, and so the Respect for Marriage Act could provide some federal protections should the court do the same with same-sex marriage.
And Giselle, as you mentioned before, the House has already passed this bill once. It went to the Senate and they made changes. That's why it had to go back to the House to be passed again. Speaker Nancy Pelosi is expected to hold a ceremonial bill signing today before sending the bill to the president for his signature.
All right, keep us posted on those developments. And Cassie, before I let you go, I want to pivot to the breaking news out of Washington this morning. President Biden announcing that WNBA star Brittney Griner has in fact been released from Russian detainment in a prisoner swap. What can you tell us about that deal?
So Griner was released from Russian detention in exchange for Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout. Now, this has been in the works for some time. CBS first reporting the news this morning. They actually are saying they learned of this swap, that it was going to happen last week, but the White House asked them not to release the information because this negotiation for Griner's release was so precarious. So they held back the information but broke the story this morning. Now, what's shocking about this deal is that it did not include U.S. citizen Paul Whelan. Whelan, of course, detained in Russia since 2018 on espionage charges. The U.S. government and his family saying they are meritless. President Biden saying today he is thinking of Paul's family, that the Russian government really gave them no option to include Whelan in this deal for Griner and Whelan, that it was Griner or nothing, but that they will continue to fight for Whelan's release. Griner is expected to be back on U.S. soil within the next 24 24 hours. She will likely need some medical treatment. She'll be evaluated. Her wife is flying to Texas, where Griner is expected to land sometime in the next 24 hours to meet her. Very happy to see those two reunited, but of course thinking of Paul Whelan's family this morning as well.
Of course. Thank you so much, Cassie, for your reporting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen?